Today we're going to look at one of Israel's honey traps. But as always, before I do that, I very much would like to thank all my subscribers. Here we can see Vanunu Mordecai, and here we can see Cheryl Bentoff, although she was at that time known as Cindy. Before we get into the story, I would like to show some pictures of the Shimon Peres Nuclear Research Center. It is in Israel, and here you can see the dome-shaped building. And here we have the main person. This is Vanunu. He's born in Morocco in the late 1950s. And as a child, he moved to Israel in 1963. By 1977, he's been in the army. He wants to be a pilot, but he's not accepted. And eventually, he ends up working at a nuclear facility. He works there for 8 years. And this is a very long period. Just remember that. And then he got fired. He's fired in 1985. And at that point, I've read somewhere that he joined the Communist Party, but I cannot get that confirmed. The union steps in, and the union makes it possible that he is hired again and works there a little bit more. And when he is rehired, he takes lots of pictures of the facility, and he quits his job in 1985, and then he starts traveling. He travels to Thailand, Nepal, Burma, and he tries to, in Kathmandu, he tries to get a visa to go to the USSR, Russia. But eventually he comes back to Thailand, and from Thailand he travels to Australia. And after a short period in Australia, he finds a job as a taxi driver, and then he changed religion. He becomes a Christian, from a Jew to a Christian. And while he's in this Christian community, he meets Oscar Guerrero, and he tells that he knows that Israel is having nuclear bombs. And Oscar says, wow, we can make $1 million on that. We can sell it. So Oscar, he starts contacting different magazines and newspapers, among others Newsweek, but eventually the Sunday Times in London is interested, and they get the story, they start checking it, and they send a journalist to Australia, and eventually they ask Vanunu to come to London. Now, while he's in London, they try to get the story confirmed. They have specialists looking into it, and the specialists say, yeah, with this knowledge, you can definitely make nuclear weapons. The newspaper asked Vanunu to stay put at this hotel, but Vanunu doesn't want to do that. So he goes sightseeing, and he goes, among others, to Leicester Square, which we can see in the picture here. Yep. And this is the Odeon Theatre. It's quite famous. And on that square, he meets this girl. And this is a much older picture of her. Now, this girl is an American girl, but she is also a Jewish girl, and she'd been in Israel trained as a Mossad agent. And she's good. She does all the classic tricks. So she looks him in the eye, but she doesn't start the conversation. It's Vanunu that talks to her, and she's like, yeah, okay, not too interested. Vanunu wants to go and have a cup of coffee or something because he feels they're both tourists. But she's busy, but she said, look, I'm very much into art. I'm going to a gallery tomorrow. Maybe we can meet there. And this is, of course, very good because Vanunu was also very much into art. So he's very pleased to finally meet somebody that has similar interests. They meet the next day at the Tate Modern Gallery. She is good at flirting, and sometimes one doesn't have to do too much obvious things. It's enough to say, okay, I'm looking forward to see you, and then just touch somebody's shoulder or arm. The next day they meet at the Tate Modern, which we can see on the picture on the right side. And within a week, it is decided that they travel to Rome. Cheryl, or Cindy as she was known, she buys a first-class ticket for him with her, and they were going to visit her sister who was living in Rome. So they land in Rome airport, they get a car, drive to the apartment, a woman opens the door, two men capture him, they drug him, put him on a speedboat or sail him out to an Israeli ship. And from there, a week later, he's in Israel, and 2 months later, there is a court case, and he gets 18 years in prison, of which he spends 12 years in solitaire. He was released in 2004, and he's still not allowed to leave Israel, and he's not really allowed to have contact with foreigners. And I've written to him. He writes on his website and on his YouTube channel that he likes to cooperate with people, but he didn't answer. And I'm not sure if that is because he's not allowed to have contact with foreigners. He seems to have plenty of contact with other foreigners, but maybe it was because I asked some questions that he didn't want to answer. This video is about the Honeytrap and how this woman used her charms and the knowledge that they had about him, like his interest in art, to trick him. But I always feel that if both people are still alive, that I should write to them. Now, none of them wrote back, but the questions I have is, okay, is this a whistleblower? Because a whistleblower is a person who informs on a person or an organization regarded as engaging in unlawful or immoral activity. It's not unlawful for Israel to make nuclear weapons. It's possibly immoral, but that depends on which point of view you have. My questions to him was like, okay, what about the money? He worked 8 years somewhere without any problems in a well-paid job. First, after he got fired, he decided to take the pictures. Then the next question is, did it actually help? Because after he exposed that Israel had nuclear bombs, the only result was that lots of Arab nations, like Iran, got ambitions to get their own nuclear weapons. And last but not least, why did he start to think about exposing her when Guerrero came up with the plan to make $1 million? Like I said, I didn't get an answer, and I don't have the answer. My aim is to make videos, not to answer difficult questions. But if you have any ideas, please leave them in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and thank to all my subscribers. I very much appreciate you guys.